It was supposed to be just another scheduled stop, Atlanta, Georgia. The gymnasium of Carver Elementary was filled to the brim with noise and anticipation. Balloons hung from the ceiling, posters of race cars and handwritten signs reading, "Welcome." Max waved in tiny hands. Max Verstappen had seen it all before. Smiling kids, flashing cameras, local news crews buzzing like bees. He smiled, posed for photos, and signed caps with practiced ease. It was part of the job. Important, yes, but predictable, until he saw her. She wasn't cheering, she wasn't holding up a sign, she wasn't even standing with the others. Instead, she lingered near the edge of the bleachers, half in shadow, hugging her backpack to her chest like it held her whole world. Her name, he would soon learn, was Nia, 10 years old, big brown eyes that spoke louder than any of the voices in the room. Max couldn't explain why she caught his attention. Maybe it was the stillness in her body amid so much noise. Maybe it was something he couldn't name. But when the last of the students had crowded around and the cameras had moved on, she stayed behind, patient, waiting. He approached her gently. "Hey there," he said, crouching slightly. "You didn't want a picture?" She shook her head, eyes cast downward. Then, after a pause, her voice came barely above a whisper. "I'm hungry." Max blinked. For a second, he wasn't sure he'd heard her right. Hungry? Was she asking? For food? Did she mean she missed lunch? But then she looked up, and in her eyes he saw it. Something raw, honest, and deeply human. Not the hunger of a missed meal, but something deeper. The kind of hunger that comes from days of doing without. The kind that weighs down a child's spirit, long before it ever touches the stomach. He sat beside her on the empty bleacher. "Where's your mum?" he asked softly. "She's working," Nia replied. "She works a lot." Max nodded slowly. "She must be really strong." "She is," Nia said, barely managing a smile. "But sometimes we don't have enough. I didn't eat today. It's okay, though. I didn't want to bother anyone." That last sentence stuck like a knife. I didn't want to bother anyone. Max wasn't a stranger to pressure, exhaustion, or sacrifice, but this was something else. This was a 10-year-old child apologizing for being hungry. He looked around. No cameras, no crew. Just the soft hum of clean-up and distant laughter from the playground. He made a quick decision. "You want to get lunch with me?" he asked. Her eyes widened, unsure if she'd heard right. "Really? Really?" He pulled out his phone and quietly texted his team that he'd be late to the next engagement. Then, standing with Nia beside him, he led her out of the gymnasium, not as a superstar or celebrity, but simply as a man who couldn't walk away from what he'd just heard. Outside, the sun hit their faces. It was a beautiful day. But Max had a feeling something far more important than a race was about to begin. Outside the school gym, the buzz of excitement faded behind them. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the pavement as Max and Nia sat quietly on a bench near the school parking lot. She nibbled on a granola bar from a volunteer's snack table, but it was clear she needed more than that. Max knelt to her eye level, his voice soft but steady. "Where's your dad, Nia?" She looked away for a moment. "I don't know him, just me and Mama. She works all the time, double shifts at the hospital and sometimes overnight cleaning offices. She's always tired." "How old are you?" he asked gently. 10, but I help her when I can." Max nodded slowly, feeling something twist in his chest. He had spent years chasing speed, records, and podiums. But this small conversation with a girl in a wrinkled shirt and scuffed sneakers made everything else feel still. Just then, a woman approached in a hurry. Nia's mother, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. Her name was Alicia. She had just gotten off work and rushed to the school when she heard about the event. "I'm sorry," she said breathlessly, reaching for her daughter. "She wasn't supposed to bother anyone." "She didn't," Max interrupted kindly. "She just told me she was hungry, Alicia looked embarrassed, her eyes darting around. "We're okay, really. She's just dramatic sometimes. We're fine." Max looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth beneath her words, the forced smile, the worn uniform, the tension in her shoulders that never really left. "Would you let me take you both to lunch?" he asked. "Someplace quiet, no press, no cameras, just us." Alicia hesitated. "We don't want any charity." "It's not charity," Max replied. "It's lunch and maybe a chance to breathe." She looked down at Nia, who was still clutching the granola bar, but staring up with wide, hopeful eyes. Slowly, Alicia nodded. They ended up at a small soul food restaurant on the outskirts of Atlanta. No flashy decor, no fans waiting at the door. Just the smell of fried chicken, cornbread, and collard greens in the air. They sat in a booth by the window, the late light casting a warm glow across their table. At first, conversation was cautious, but as the meal went on, Alicia opened up. She told Max about the nursing job she lost when the hospital downsized, about how the rent kept climbing while her paychecks shrank, about the nights she drank water to silence the growling in her own stomach so that Nia could have a little more on her plate. "There's never enough time," she said quietly, looking down at her calloused hands. "And never enough money. But she's my world. I just want her to be a kid, to smile without worrying." Max listened, really listened. Not like an athlete hearing a story before a press event, but like a man whose heart was cracking open in real time. And somewhere between the sweet tea refills and the hush puppies, he made a decision. One he didn't announce. One that had nothing to do with cameras, brands, or headlines. When the check came, Max paid it without fanfare. But in his heart, something had shifted. He wasn't going to walk away from this, not this time, because sometimes a simple meal wasn't just about food. It was about dignity. It was about being seen, and Max Verstappen had seen enough to know this family mattered. By the time the sun rose the next morning, everything had changed. What had started as a quiet lunch in a modest Atlanta diner turned into national news, without Max ever intending it. A local server had recognized him the day before and shared a short video clip online. It wasn't staged or edited. It was Max sitting across from Nia and her mother, listening intently, nodding, smiling warmly. The video went viral overnight. The caption read, "Max Verstappen didn't just sign autographs in Atlanta. He sat down with a struggling family, listened, and gave them hope." From there, the story caught fire. Within 24 hours, Max's team confirmed that he had quietly donated $200,000 to launch a new food initiative in Atlanta, one focused on feeding children in underserved neighborhoods. He'd named it Nia's Table. He hadn't planned a press release. No ribbon cutting, no photo ops. Just a heartfelt donation and a letter to the city urging others to act. "This isn't about me. It's about making sure kids like Nia don't go to bed hungry. Let's fix what we can, starting with one plate at a time." Max Verstappen reporters flocked to the diner where it all started. Journalists visited Nia's neighborhood. Talk shows debated how one quiet gesture could spark such a massive wave of generosity. Max's inbox overflowed with interview requests, but he stayed silent. His statement had already been made. Meanwhile, back in their small apartment, Nia and her mom were stunned by the kindness pouring in. Groceries appeared at their doorstep from anonymous donors. Local restaurants offered free meals. A tech company in Atlanta offered Alicia a flexible job with full benefits. They even helped her enroll in night classes to finish her nursing certification. For the first time in years, she felt like her life was moving forward, not just surviving. Nia, too, began to change. The once quiet girl who had stood alone at a school event now walked a little taller. Her classmates had seen the news. Teachers smiled more when she entered the room. One day, she found a note in her desk that read, "You're brave. Thanks for speaking up." Her story touched something deep in people. Churches held food drives in her name. A local grocery chain pledged 10% of their profits for a month to Nia's table. And across social media, thousands began sharing their own struggles with hunger, sparking a larger national conversation. Max finally broke his silence a week later during a quiet press conference after a race. A reporter asked, "Why now?" Max looked down, then answered simply, "Because sometimes you need to lose a race to remember what real winning looks like. I didn't feed Nia, she fed my purpose." The clip was shared millions of times. Back in Atlanta, Nia sat on her apartment balcony one night, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Her mom joined her with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Nia thought for a moment, then said, "Full." Alicia smiled, tears in her eyes. What had started with 2 small words, "I'm hungry," had become a rallying cry for change. Not just for them, but for thousands. And the world was listening. 3 months had passed since that quiet afternoon changed everything. Atlanta had moved on in some ways. The news vans gone, the headlines faded, but the impact of Nia's table was just beginning to grow. Dozens of schools now participated in the program. Thousands of meals had been served. And Nia, she was no longer the shy girl in the corner. Max Verstappen returned without fanfare. No media, no PR team, no cameras. Just him, a dark hoodie, sunglasses, and a quiet ride to the school where it all began. Inside the auditorium, rows of folding chairs filled quickly. Parents, students, teachers, all buzzing with anticipation for the year-end assembly. But this one was different. On stage were brand new backpacks filled with school supplies. Boxes of food sat stacked behind the curtain, ready to be distributed to families in need. And standing beside the microphone, dressed in a simple yellow dress, was Nia. She spotted Max standing quietly at the back, and for a moment her confidence faltered. Then she smiled. She ran off stage, down the aisle, and threw her arms around him. The crowd clapped, not because of who he was, but because they had all heard what he'd done. Max walked her back up to the stage. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Nia took the mic and cleared her throat. "A few months ago," she began, "I told someone I was hungry. I didn't expect anything. I was just telling the truth." She paused, scanning the audience. "But he believed me, and because he believed in me, I started believing in myself." The auditorium erupted in applause. Some parents cried. Teachers nodded, visibly moved. For once, it wasn't about pity. It was about possibility. Max stayed only a little longer. As the event ended and families filtered out, he slipped through a side door unnoticed. Outside, he stood under the same tree where Nia had waited that day. The sun filtered through the leaves, warm and golden. A reporter had once asked him what the greatest victory of his life was. He dodged the question. Now, standing in the soft Atlanta light, he knew the answer. It wasn't Monaco. It wasn't a championship. It wasn't even about racing. It was this, a little girl who no longer walked with her head down, and a community, reminded that someone, somewhere, cared enough to listen. As his car pulled away, Max glanced at the school in the rearview mirror. Nia was outside, waving. He smiled. In Formula One, every second counts. Every turn, every pit stop, every decision can make or break a career. But today wasn't about seconds. It was about something timeless. A different kind of win. One that would never fade. One that would last a lifetime. Sometimes, the most powerful. Stories begin not with a headline, but with a whisper. Nia didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't hold a sign or stage a protest. She simply looked up and said, "I'm hungry." And in a world that moves too fast to notice the quiet voices, someone finally stopped and listened. This wasn't just a story about a celebrity, and a child. It was about something deeper, something urgent, a reminder that behind every tired face, every quiet child, every overworked parent, there is a story waiting to be seen. How many Nias walk past us every day, unheard? How often do we look away from discomfort, convincing ourselves it's someone else's problem to solve? What would happen if just once we stopped and listened, really listened, to someone who needed us? Max Verstappen didn't change the world that day, but he changed one world, and that's how real change begins. You don't need millions. You don't need fame. You don't need to be a racing champion. You just need to be present, to care, to act when it's easier not to. So we ask you, when was the last time you chose compassion over convenience? When was the last time you used your voice or your resources to lift someone else up? What kind of world could we build if more people believed that helping one person was enough to start? Nia's story isn't just hers anymore. It belongs to all of us now. It's a call to look closer, to listen harder, and to never underestimate the impact of one moment of kindness, because sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths, and sometimes the most ordinary people become the reason someone else believes in a better tomorrow. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, leave a like, share it, and subscribe. Let's keep telling stories that matter. And more importantly, let's live them.